Pam Bondi was laughed at, brushed aside, and even challenged to prove herself in the spotlight. But what unfolded next completely turned the tables and left everyone stunned. It all happened during a podcast episode that no one had expected to gain traction, let alone go viral. The guest that day was Jackson Weller, a rising indie rock musician from Portland, well known for his sharp wit and unapologetically progressive views. He was midway through a lively story about performing at a charity fundraiser when the host threw out a casual question. "Ever run into any political figures backstage?" Jackson chuckled, took a sip of his drink, and leaned in toward the microphone with a smirk. "Pam Bondi was at one of those gigs," he said, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Nice enough lady, I guess, but let's be real. She looked at the grand piano like it was an IKEA coffee table. I'd bet good money she couldn't tell middle C from a cup of Starbucks." The room erupted in laughter. It was exactly the kind of remark his audience, young, left-leaning, and wary of anyone with a political resume, loved. Jackson had built his brand on quick-witted jabs, the kind that stung just enough to entertain but rarely enough to start real fires. Except this time, it stuck. Within hours, clips of that moment flooded social media. The quote, neatly trimmed and looped for maximum effect, spread like wildfire. Memes popped up left and right, captions ranging from "Jackson shreds Pam Bondi with a musical burn" to "Pam, do you even know what a piano is?" It was the kind of viral moment that fuels online culture, fast, ruthless, and everywhere. Pam, however, stayed silent. At that very moment in Tampa, she was sitting at her kitchen counter, phone buzzing beside her. Her niece had just sent her the clip, accompanied by a laughing, crying emoji. Pam watched the video once, then again. But there was no eye roll, no scoff, no immediate reaction. Instead, she simply sighed, calmly locked her phone, and placed it face down on the counter. Her tea had gone cold. But she didn't delete the clip. And Jackson? He wasn't done. A week later, in an interview with a Seattle-based digital magazine, he doubled down. "Look, she's lawyer smart. Sure. But creativity? I seriously doubt she's got a single artistic bone in her body," he quipped. "You can't fake art. Either you feel it or you don't." That line changed everything. What had started as a joke had taken a sharper edge, less playful, more personal. Some fans still chuckled, brushing it off as typical Jackson banter. Others, however, felt an uneasy shift. The comment section started to reflect the tension. "Dude, is this really necessary?" one longtime follower wrote. "Stick to music, man," another added. But Jackson didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't care. He was gearing up for a tour through Florida, including a stop in Sarasota next month. In his mind, the chatter would blow over long before then. What he didn't know was that Pam had just received a last-minute invitation to a prestigious charity event. A fundraiser dedicated to music and the arts, benefiting children in need. The very same event where Jackson was scheduled to perform. Pam had no intention of taking the stage. For years, she had remained in the background at such gatherings, attending as a quiet donor, offering support without stepping into the spotlight. She hadn't played in public for more than 15 years, and as far as she was concerned, that part of her life was in the past. Or, at least, it had been. Later that week, something inside her shifted. She stepped into her guest room, pulled the dust-covered sheet off her upright piano, and ran her fingers lightly over the keys. They were stiff, out of tune, a little like an old memory just waiting to be revived. She let out a small smile. Then she pulled out her phone. "Hey, Dan," she said as the line connected. "You still tuning pianos?" Meanwhile, Jackson was keeping up his usual press circuit. During a radio interview in Clearwater, he took yet another dig at Pam. "Who knows," he joked. "Maybe she'll bring some sheet music. Maybe we'll even get a surprise performance of Chopsticks." The host laughed along, the audience chuckled, and Jackson smirked, assuming the joke had landed. What he didn't realize was that Pam had been practicing every single day. What he didn't know was that she had already chosen her piece. What he didn't suspect, at all, was that she had no plans to respond with words. She was going to let the music do the talking. As the night of the event approached, the anticipation built. Those who knew Pam Bondi only from TV saw a carefully curated public image, sharp suits, firm statements, a composed and measured presence. She was known for her precision, her control, her ability to command a room with words alone. But before the politics, before the law degree, before the TV appearances, there had been something else. Music. Pam had grown up in Dade City, Florida. Her father was the town's fire chief, her mother a devoted churchgoer who played piano every Sunday. Every Thursday afternoon, 8-year-old Pam would walk 3 blocks from school to Mrs. Donatelli's house, where an aging Baldwin upright piano stood in the living room, surrounded by the scent of lemon polish and well-worn sheet music. She was 10 when she first fell in love with Chopin. Mrs. Donatelli had been strict, the kind of teacher who didn't allow shortcuts. Whenever Pam slouched or fumbled a note, the sharp rap of a ruler against the bench would bring her back to focus. "Feel the space," the elderly instructor would say. "Don't just press the notes. Tell the truth." And now, decades later, Pam's fingers were finding their way back to that truth. Jackson had no idea what was coming, but he and everyone else was about to find out. At just 15, Pam was effortlessly playing sonatas from memory. By 16, she had competed in the Tampa Bay Youth Music Competition, taking second place, a moment that should have been a proud milestone. But that night still lingered in her mind, not because of the award, but because of what had happened on stage. Midway through a Debussy piece, she froze. A silence so heavy filled the room that she could almost hear the weight of her own heartbeat. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she stood up, walked off stage, and folded the event program into a neat square. For years, she carried that little square in her wallet, a quiet reminder of a promise she never spoke aloud. But life had other ideas. Her parents split. College came quickly. Music, while still inside her, faded into the background. Criminology took over, then law. She convinced herself that she would return to the piano someday, when things settled, when there was time. That time never came. Years turned into decades. Career demands took priority: long workdays, courtrooms, press briefings, campaign trails. The piano remained in her guest room, buried under books and framed photographs, collecting dust like an unfinished sentence. People eventually stopped asking about her hobbies, assuming she had none. Even those closest to her never thought to ask. Except for one person, Grant Hallberg, a fellow prosecutor, younger than her by a few years, with a quiet but observant nature. In 2007, during one particularly grueling case, Pam and Grant found themselves working late nights at the office, eating bad takeout, their conversations mostly clipped and practical. Until one evening, when he noticed something unusual, a few sheets of music peeking out from her briefcase. His brows lifted slightly. "You play?" Pam hesitated, fingers stiffening around her fork. "Used to." "What piece?" A longer pause this time. Then, softly, "Nocturne in C minor." Grant blinked, visibly surprised. "That's not beginner stuff." She only nodded and went back to eating. Nothing more was said. A few weeks later, on her birthday, she found a small envelope resting on her desk. Inside was a single sheet of music, the opening bars of that same nocturne, along with a yellow sticky note attached. "Don't wait forever." 5 months later, Grant was gone. A brain aneurysm. No warning. No goodbye. She never threw the note away. Years passed. The piano remained untouched. And then, one afternoon, her niece sent her a short video clip, the one of Jackson Weller smirking into a microphone, casually dismissing her as someone who wouldn't know a grand piano from an IKEA table. It wasn't just a joke. It was a push. She felt it. The same tight breath she'd felt at 16 after walking off that stage. The same sharp sting that had never fully faded. But it wasn't anger. It wasn't embarrassment. It was something else entirely. By the time the Sarasota charity event approached, she had been practicing nightly for nearly 4 weeks. At first, her fingers struggled, stiff, reluctant, unfamiliar with the keys after so many years. But muscle memory is a powerful thing. Slowly, it came back. The late nights became routine, the notes began to flow, and something inside her started waking up. She chose her piece carefully. It had to be the right one. It had to mean something. It was the same piece she had abandoned at 16. Debussy's Clair de Lune. As the event neared, her name began appearing on guest lists, but only as a donor. No announcements. No hints. Nothing unusual to suggest what was coming. Jackson Weller never noticed. Or if he did, he didn't connect the dots. He had his own setlist prepared, a few industry friends flying in, and a night of good press ahead of him. He expected a relaxed evening, drinks, applause, maybe a few playful jabs at Pam Bondi, just for the laughs. He had no idea she'd been rehearsing. No idea she was coming, not for recognition, not for revenge. She was coming for the music. But the stage wouldn't be his forever. And when the moment came, everything would shift in a way no one saw coming. The Ritz-Carlton Ballroom in Sarasota shimmered under elegant strings of light, casting a golden hue over the evening. It was a charity gala, but it was also a spectacle, a polished gathering of Florida's elite. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Silent auction sheets filled up with neat bids. An extravagant shrimp tower stood proudly in one corner, untouched yet admired. And near center stage, like an afterthought, sat a Steinway grand piano. A piece of furniture waiting to be acknowledged. The event's theme: art for the next generation. Funds raised tonight would go toward local school music programs, supporting young artists in need. Pam Bondi arrived just after 7:15 p.m., slipping in with the ease of someone used to attending high-profile events. A simple black satin dress, understated heels. No entourage, no announcement. No press alerts. She had no plans to take the stage. At least, not yet.